this wall, and there is a lounge where there's more food and beverages if you're interested. But again, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ramanique to give us his TED Talk. Thank you for coming.
Hi. Thanks everyone for coming. I hope I don't bore you to death. I put this deck together for this, so we'll figure out how it goes and whether people find any value in it. Maybe I will start real fast with a sip of water and tell you a little bit about myself. So I am CTO at Earnin. I came to Earnin maybe 4.5 years ago from PayPal. Ran consumer mobile app development there. So the PayPal app was my product. I was at PayPal for just a few years, but I came in through an acquisition. I co-founded a mobile app development company maybe 3.5 years earlier. We were fortunate enough to have some acquisition offers, Facebook and PayPal, and we ended up going the PayPal route. Anyway, pretty happy with experience from there and certainly from Earnin. My path has always been, ever since I moved to Silicon Valley from the Midwest, it's followed a sort of interesting path. I always opted to go to small startups. So I moved out to California, I joined a small startup, and then 6 months later we got acquired by Microsoft. And so it's like, okay, I'm in a big company, and I waited a little bit, and then I left that company and went with the founder from WebTV, if anyone actually remembers that product from a long time ago. With that co-founder, I went to his startup, and then I forget how much longer it was, but we ended up being acquired by Paul Allen Company. I stayed there for a few more years, and was like, okay, time to get back to a small company. And I joined another company. I think I was the 4th or 5th employee there. And then we eventually got acquired by Dell Computer, which is like 90,000 person company. So I ended up leaving there right around the time that Apple released their first iPhone SDK. And then I co-founded a mobile app company, and then we got acquired by PayPal. So it's in another big company. Anyway, I've now here been at Earnin for a little while and seen the company grow from, I'm joining 16, 17 people to where, I don't know, 300-ish maybe now, and on a pretty steep growth trajectory. So maybe this will turn into a really big company on its own. No need for acquisition, which I hope we don't need that. Cool. Anyway, we can hop into it. Okay, so yeah, maybe I'll start by explaining what Earnin is before I get into any of the other stuff I was going to talk about. So it's I guess this is just some of the data on it, but we were founded in 2013. We're in Palo Alto, and I guess the value of calling out this NPS score is just that. Maybe I'll back up. Do people in general, or does anyone know what NPS is or what it's used for?
No.
I think there's a little bit of yes and a little bit of no. I'll just cover it real fast. It's called Net Promoter Score. It is a measure of how much people are likely to recommend your product to somebody else. That's a really good thing to look at if you want to figure out how people view you, how they're talking about you when you're not around. Net Promoter Score is a great way to measure it. The way you do it, you take a scale of I think it's pretty consistent, 0 to 10. 10 meaning that I love this product to death, I'm going to tell everyone all the time. 0 means you really suck, you can say really nasty things about the product. The way you do is you take the percentage of, they're called promoters, and promoters are either a 9 or a 10, so super happy with you, and you subtract away the detractors. Detractors go 0 to 6, so 7 and 8's neutral, they're not counted in this score. So it's heavily weighted towards you got to really like the product to be in that promoter side, and we count a good chunk of the rest of people as detractors. And so when we end up with a 78%, that means that I think we're doing pretty good. To give you some context, in financial services, big banks in the U.S. If I forget to mention it, I'm generally referring to the U.S. Sometimes I call that out, but Chase one of the largest banks, top three, Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. The NPS for Chase is 8. The NPS for Wells Fargo is -12. And the NPS for Bank of America, -24. So, I mean, there are banks that are in the US that are doing really well. USAA, I think, is in the low 70s. That's like the best. And most of the big banks sort of suck. People don't recommend them. They're not really happy with them. So the fact that we have sort of, created a financial product that is, intention to be on the side of customers and it's received that way is really nice. So, what does our product do? Well, it allows people to get access to their earnings on demand. We use technology. The basic idea is that if you've earned some money, you should have access to it. The fact that their employer holds on to money you worked all day today, you might not see that for a week and a half, 2 weeks based on your pay cycle. A lot of people might need that. Maybe not on a regular basis, but stuff comes up. There's over 40% of the US workforce can't sustain $400 of unexpected expense without it causing some sort of hardship. They might have to sell something, they might have to go borrow money. They'll have to do something to account for that. That's a lot. It used to be a little bit closer to 50%. 78, so Career Builder did this study, 78% of the people, of people in the US self-reported themselves to be paycheck to paycheck, which it wasn't by any, to my knowledge, it wasn't by any specific measure of how much money you have, but just people that felt like if something happens, am I going to be in trouble or am I going to be okay? Do I have enough money to manage that? And so, I mean, that's 4 out of every 5 people pretty much that, for people that are in Silicon Valley and maybe in Vancouver, it might not seem like that's as, that seems right, but in the rest of, in the US, the rest of the place, it was pretty shocking to me to hear numbers like that 4 out of 5 people feel like they're on the edge or could have some sort of problem. So our product helps people, address things like that. The gray area where you earned enough money, but something bad happens, or maybe not even that bad. You want to avoid a bank overdraft fee because you bought a coffee, and it's going to take you down, -$3, and the banks end up doing things to cause you to have 3 overdrafts in a row, and suddenly you're like $120 negative. Our product helps people address those kind of things. Okay, so how's the product work? We use technology to figure out how much you earn, when you go to work, how much you've earned. We build this real-time earnings account for you. And then when you need it, you use the app, you decide how much you want to get access to, and we can push the money into a person's account instantly. So it's a pretty cool experience to know that you can leave your office, you can drive to an ATM and stand in line and say, I need access to $50 that I just earned for whatever the reason is, and it can be available for you. And then I think another unusual aspect of our company is our revenue model. It's we don't have any set fee, no interest. It's a revenue model based on people paying what they feel the service is worth. So another way to frame it is it's a tip model. People just decide, and 0 is always an option. So people don't have to pay for our service. The thesis why it was even attempted this way, and I wasn't there in the very beginning. Ram founded the company, and this was, I give him all the credit. But the theory was that most financial services they provide something, but they tell you what it's worth. And in many cases, you have no choice, or it's incredibly hard. Most people probably would not choose to pay $30, $35, $40, $42 for an overdraft fee. I don't think anyone would choose to pay that. But you have very little choice, and if your account goes negative, you get hit with those kind of fees. The idea behind Earnin was let's let's provide a valuable service, and let's leave it up to the people that are consuming the service to decide how valuable it is. And you can choose if you feel like it's worth something, you can tip, and if you don't, then maybe you don't use the product anymore, or maybe you're in a bind and you just don't want to pay. But this model has worked for us, and it usually surprises people. But there's 5+ years of data, and it's one of our more stable metrics. And I think we've come to feel pretty confident, and our investors feel pretty confident that it's a model that works for us. And even in other products that we're introducing, we're following the same model. So some of the other features that we have in the app right now: financial calendar, helps you understand when your bills are due. Balance shield, I think I mentioned, if you enable balance shield, we'll watch your account. If it looks like you're going to go negative, we'll move money from your earnings into your checking account and help you avoid that overdraft fee. Rewards, there's a good chunk of people don't actually use credit cards, and being Silicon Valley, it was a little surprising to me, but it turns out that most people don't. They use debit cards. They either have trouble with credit or have been burned by credit, and so they just stay clear of it, and you use what you have in your checking account, and so they use debit cards, and you generally don't get any rewards when you use your debit card. So our product has made that possible, and so it's so anyway, that's the rewards aspect. It allows you, with a debit card added to the account, to get some a little bit back, which is a nice thing for people that generally haven't been able to do that. And then Health Aid, it's a product that we announced not terribly long ago. Haven't had a lot of time with it, but time enough to prove that it's really valuable for people. It is so there's some data, I think I wrote it down. Let's see, 70% of people cut back on food or other necessities to pay for medical bills. That sucks. We launched the product not too long ago. The way it works, you upload your medical bill, and we'll negotiate on your behalf. We have, I think, in the time that we've launched, and it hasn't been that long, we've saved people over $120,000 in medical fees. And it's, you do the math, so about 1,000 people in the time that we've launched, and it's about $120 a person, which is, I mean, given the numbers I've already mentioned, that's non-trivial. That's really meaningful for people. A few other things that I think are interesting. I throw out some more of these stats because I think they're kind of surprising. Overdraft fees. Banks made, I don't remember if it was last year, or 2 years, or 4 years ago, but they made like $30 billion in overdraft fees, which was more in U.S. Than was spent on fresh vegetables, which is just crazy. Anyway, I always think that's just a shocking fact, and there you go. Oh yeah. We generally hold data really close to our vest. We don't share lots of numbers, and so you'll notice there's no numbers on this, and there's no timeline. That was pretty much the only way I got the okay to add it in here. But at least it gives you some sense of the fact that we're growing pretty fast. It's not a lot of companies, startups, I should say, are fortunate enough to end up in a situation where you can have this kind of very fast growth. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about. Taking sips of water. So I think if you saw the overview, there's sort of 4 tracks of what I'm going to try and cover. If this is taking too long, tell me and I'll go faster. But one of the things that I think I'd like to mention to keep in mind as I go through this is just in general, the term startup is sort of a generic term. You know, what I joined 4.5 years ago, I'd say, is not even a super early stage startup, but maybe it still qualifies as that. I think nowadays we're a growth stage startup, and we are night and day different than what we were, back then. And I would say the amount of change that we've seen in the last 6 months is dramatic. I mean, we think we've doubled our company in the last 8 months or something like that. So when people say startup, and I guess I'm just curious, are there lots of people here that are currently in startups, or yeah, are they? You can shout it out. People qualifying generally as small, early stage startups, growth stage.
Early stage and startup.
Yeah. Sorry, you didn't even. Yeah, yeah. I just kind of the thing that as I've made these slides that it just kept hitting me is like how drastically different we are, and it's kind of looked at the progression. You've probably heard this before. The only constant is change. It's like can always expect that things are going to be different than they are now. So for people that are considering startups, I view that as really exciting. And so I guess everyone's different, but all right. Let's see. And the other set of things that I want to point out, kind of as I go through this, is that it's a constant trade-off between quality and speed. I hate to say it that way, but you can move fast and break things, or you can test it to death and almost never ship. It's a spectrum, and you're always making a decision as to where you need to be on this. There's tech debt versus features. If you have funding, you know that you need to get certain things out in order to get yourself looking the right way to get the next funding round. There's pressure, and sometimes you end up not doing the work on the technical debt. You don't move to microservices as fast as you want to. You don't address your database problems as fast as you want to, and you take on technical debt. And it's always this gamble, this trade-off, because that can bite you big time down the road. I'm thinking this is mostly engineering, and you guys probably hate to hear that taking on technical debt. I hate it myself, but then you also can look at how's the company doing as a result of that, and where would it have been had you spent all your time working on technical debt and you didn't build the things that got you the additional customers, that got you, the interest from the nicer, the higher end VCs. It's always this constant trade-off. Okay, so the four things I'll go through: org structure and people. Kind of talking about how this is really just a recollection of how we've evolved. It's not necessarily that every company will look like this, but this is what I've experienced. And so how we've evolved our data infrastructure. Kind of the data is the first place, at least one of the first places where you start to see cracks when you grow fast. That's one of the places you get you start to see problems. Microservices, I'll spoil it right now. We started on this journey 2 years ago. I don't know, we're 30% of the way done. It's and not because it necessarily takes that long. It's because we make these trade-offs all the time. Do we focus on this or do we focus on that? And when the system's working and what you're moving towards will actually make you move faster, sometimes you still can't do that as fast as you want to. And security. And the theme here is basically kind of this transition from when you're small and there's your risk threshold, your risk whatever is maybe not as high. Everybody's access everything. Everyone can touch everything in production. Everybody can access every key, and that's great, and it helps you be flexible and move fast. And as you start to get bigger and you have more customers and there's more on the line and you have to be PCI compliant or this compliant or that compliant, that doesn't fly anymore. And so we've had to evolve, and so I'll briefly cover that too. Okay, so we can start with org structure. All right, so when I joined the company, there were 4 back-end engineers and 2 mobile engineers. We have an office in Cincinnati, and the 4 back-end engineers were there. We had an ISO mobile in Palo Alto, and everybody reported to the CEO. In fact, whatever the total 15, 16 people, everyone reported to the CEO, super flat. When I joined, the engineering team ended up reporting to me. You had the benefit of flexibility. 4 people who had owned this back-end infrastructure for a long time they could work on pretty much anything. They all knew how to get into the system. It was way less complex back then than it is now. You also had other interesting dynamic. When everyone reports to a CEO who isn't from an engineering background, on this trade-off of flexibility or speed versus tech debt, all that, you will leverage heavily when everyone is taking direct direction from the CEO towards building features. And you will end up with lots more tech debt. And so that's kind of where we started. And then, I don't know, maybe that was 2 years of ish, and now we're 20 engineers, and everyone's still reporting to me, so it's still flat, at least in the engineering side. But if I suspect people will take a guess that it's really hard to be any sort of manager to 20 people. I mean, pretty much there's very little management going on when there's 20 direct reports. So that's a problem. And then this whole idea of like, it was great when 4 people knew how to work on every part of the system, but now the system's really complex. And nobody knows how to work on every part of the system. So every time we would shuffle people around really fast and be like, oh, go work on this project, they'd spend so much time trying to figure out how the hell it worked. These different subsystems. So, that's what happens when you grow that fast, and so then you have to make a change. And hop to the next one there. So you have to put some more structure in place. And this is sort of the beginning of our transition from sort of flexibility to specialization. And so we had, in our system, I think I'll probably mention a couple times, we had, I don't know, a handful of domains, areas of common stuff that it was easy for us to sort of group and be like, okay, this is going to be the team that sort of builds domain knowledge and ownership around, our bank connection infrastructure or money movement infrastructure. And so we moved to that model, and I think that was, it might seem sort of natural now or obvious that, it was obvious, for us it was a good. So as the story goes on, we keep growing, and now that one layer, I'm getting back to having close to 10 direct reports, and some of the managers that we have are also getting very large number of direct reports, and that's challenging. By now we'd started this office. We had started hiring folks here in Vancouver, and so I'm sure you'll guess what has to happen next. We can hop to the next slide. Yeah, so we had to add a little more structure, and more dedicated functions. We had there's an interesting challenge. You're hiring. We try to keep a high bar. We feel very good about the engineering talent that we've hired. We're proud of the folks, but we weren't looking for managers most of the time. We were looking for like strong technical people. And at some point, when you need to have some structure, you need to have some managers. And we did maybe what a lot of people do is we looked for the strongest technical people, and we're like, hey, do you want to manage people? And sometimes they said yes, and sometimes they're like, well, if you really need me to. Some people had experience, and other people were willing to take that risk and take that step, and that worked well for us for a while, and it allowed us to continue to grow. As you can guess, it doesn't always work well. Sometimes people want to step back. They're like, you know what, I want to write more code. I don't like talking to people. So it ended up, in some cases it worked well, in other cases maybe not so much. And then, that was, I think, 8 months ago, we were around 80-ish people in engineering. Now, like, over 150. We recently, got to the point where we had too many top-level functions. There's a lot of functions. When you're a tiny startup, you think that, okay, I have engineering, I have back-end engineers, and now we have like, okay, well, I have SRE folks, and I have DevOps, and I have Cloud Ops, and I have, under security, I have IT, and I have this and that, and so now we're maturing, we're becoming a little more grown up, But we have a lot more functions, and so now we have, some of our senior leaders are not just owning one thing, they're owning multiple things. Yeah, and anyway, that's around where we are right now. Data. Okay, so I think I mentioned earlier, data is one of the first things to crack, at least in my experience. As you grow relatively fast, jump into it. So this was how things looked, when I started. It's not that we had two customers. We have more, but easier to represent this way. We did have one database. We had a Microsoft SQL Server database. We're in AWS, and we're using their RDS, the relational data store, whatever. So it's managed. It's managed database, and that means if you're familiar with using a lot of these managed products, you're probably not getting the most cutting-edge version of it. You're handicapped a bit, and you're trading that off against flexibility. You don't have to manage your own cluster. You don't have to manage, your own database. They'll do it for you. So that worked great, when the product was relatively small. It started to show problems as we grew. Go to the next one. And I'll also add, and this is certainly no dig on any data scientists or any data analysts or any product managers, but we had one database, which meant that they're doing BI or analysis or trying to understand what things are going on by hitting our production database with queries. And we're all human. You can write a bad query, and that can really screw things up. It's a little worse as you add more customers. So we add more customers. Just hop on. Oh no, wait. This is the cool animation. You write a bad query, database falls over. Suddenly the app doesn't work for anybody. And we, I think we take that. Everyone probably says they want high uptime. They don't want their customers to suffer. I think we probably, as many do, feel like it's more important for our customers because it's their money. When they use our product, when somebody uses our product, it's because they needed access to money, and so it stings a little bit more. We have a lot of amazing stories that tell us, how we've saved somebody's ass, how they were able to get access to money, and they were able to buy prescriptions for their kids or do this or that, like really touching stories. And we have stories that make us feel really bad. Somebody desperately needed to use our product, and we fucked up. It's a system. Somebody wrote a bad query, and somebody else couldn't pay for something really important to them, and they relied on us. They were expecting us to come through, and we didn't. So this stuff is bad, and we don't want it to happen. And so we of course had to make things better. I like this view of things. It's managed database, and it's AWS. So I imagine it this way: you have a get bigger button, and so it's vertical scaling. You just the database with a bigger instance, and it buys you a lot more headroom. And that's a really, I mentioned we're always in this trade-off and frequently leaning towards build more features, fix certain things in order, as opposed to addressing architectural or tech debt. And by the way, I don't want to frame this as like we are shitty engineers and we don't ever address tech debt. It's just, I want to paint the real reality of it. In order to get some of the results we have as a business, you gotta sometimes make some of the trade-offs, and then you have to go back and catch up at some point. So we hit the get bigger button, and get bigger, and it's a little bit too easy because you can become reliant on it. You can know that that's in your back pocket, and if you are going to grow by N% in your volume, and you're going to have the same problem, when you look at the AWS console that you got 2 more instance sizes you can go up, and so it makes you push off solving certain problems in a real way, and use the handicap. So we do it, and at some point it's like the button goes gray, you hit the biggest instance that you can on this particular database. It turns out that because we're using this handicapped version of SQL Server, we probably could have, if we were managing it ourselves, we could have done a lot more, but we weren't. We were using AWS's version of it, their managed version, and so we knew that we were like, all right, now it's getting dangerous. We hit the biggest instance size. We see the rate we're growing at. We know if marketing continues to spend this rate or we continue to grow at this rate, I think we felt like we had maybe a little bit more than a quarter, maybe a quarter and a half before we were going to be really screwing up our customers. So, I mean, the nice thing is that when you can at least, that this is the limited time, it's really easy to override any decision to build more features. And so we went back and we cleaned up, and maybe not as much as we'd like to, but we cleaned up enough to be able to keep moving forward and buy ourselves lots of headroom. So one of the things that we decided to do, there's lots of ways to solve problems in general. Our decision was to break up the database, and that meant you don't just move tables into different databases, you got to go in and clean up your code too. When it was early on, it was easy to have there's some structure there. The domains were sort of easy to see where they were, but they were all classes. People would reach into different classes of level, not like really cleanly defined external APIs. A little sloppy, and so I like it this way. This is code, and we sort of have these domains. There's lots of overlap, lots of people, not good encapsulation, people reaching in and querying tables from other people's domains. So we started with that, and we decided to go ahead and clean it up. And one more.
No more.
There you go. So anyway, this is my representation for now. It's not overlapped. It's a little bit cleaner, crisper lines. And so this is code. Representation of code. We did a fair amount of cleaning some external APIs, turning these things from classes, and so we are the artifact that came out of the build process were DLLs. So it was at least something that would make it a little bit easier to control what's being linked in there, who has access to what. So we did a fair bit of that, and we also decided while we're doing this and we're going to go and mess with the database, we're going to evaluate whether we want to go to a different database technology. Nothing against SQL Server, but if we wanted to continue to have that benefit of AWS and easy buttons that do things like all sorts of great stuff for you, we decided that we would stick with the managed database, and AWS had announced Aurora a while ago, but they felt like it actually was mature enough to be considered, and so we looked at a little bit of evaluation, and then we ended up deciding to go with Aurora. They sold it as more performant, horizontally scalable, cheaper. Cheaper's good. We could, if we got into a bind, we could get even bigger instances, so that get bigger button would continue to work for us even more. It's well supported by AWS at the time. I think it might still just be MySQL and Postgres. So it's maybe I'll say a few more words. Aurora is it's a cluster. You have a writer node, and then you have as many readers as you want, and I think we thought it would be easier to take advantage of those readers. That's where you get this horizontal scalability. You can just spin up a new reader, and you can load balance access to it, and so you can. Most patterns are you write a little bit and then you read a whole bunch, and so it made sense that this is going to be great. We'd have to do a little bit of work, and we'd be able to take advantage of it. We ended, to be honest, we got most value out of just breaking things apart. Having these domains that had their own databases and cleaned up access to it, we were able to have the ones that actually had high volume sized correctly, and the ones that didn't need a lot of capacity sized at the right amount. We didn't get as much initial value out of this horizontal scalability, this ability to have lots of different readers. It's something that we have over time, continue to take advantage of, and in some places it's been fantastic. In other places, I wish we would have more time to just stop and re-architect something so you can take advantage of that pattern better. But it's I think I would love to like feel like it's the most elegant, most beautiful code and architecture. But I'm also happy to trade some of that off for being able to help a lot of people with a product. Okay, so one of the things that I like in this whole process too is, I'm sure everyone's heard expressions like this before, rebuilding a plane while it's still flying. We can't stop making the product work for our customers. So we had to come up with our approach, and maybe somebody afterwards will provide like, hey, you should have done it this way, and be like, we should have done that. But what we did was, this took down pretty much our whole engineering team for like a quarter. I mean, this is every week we had a company meeting, and we used to go through, and every department, every team would like talk about what we were doing, and data migration was the way we just generally framed it, and that was a thing that every team said, every company meeting for a quarter. The process we took was, we put some code in place. We basically, I wish I had drawn some extra diagrams here, but we had our old database, that one big SQL Server database, and then we have this new Aurora cluster. And so for a particular domain, we would modify the code. We would write not only to the old database, but whenever there was a write operation, we'd write to the new database. We did that for a while. We then added in some code that whenever you wrote, go back, make sure that the results can compare, and get comfortable that we're actually doing a good job of that. And then you now this is only from the time we deployed that code, right? You deploy some code, it's writing to a new database, and then you got to backfill all this database. So we use AWS has this data migration service, DMS, and we utilize that in order to backfill all the data that was missing there. And so now theoretically, you have the old database, you're writing to it, you're accessing it, you're reading it. You're also reading to the new, writing to the new database, the new Aurora cluster. At some point, you need to actually make all the re-queries, the things that actually use the data, that needs to be coming out of the new place. And so we then would go to, you can't have it break if it's wrong. So we'd read from both, we'd issue every query to both databases, and we'd only use the results from the one that we knew with the old one that we used good, and then we'd find problems and we'd fix it, and after some period of time, we gained confidence that we actually had it all right, and then we'd switch all the read accesses, all the read queries back over to the new Aurora database, and then finally we started to unwind stuff, and we're done with the old database. And we did this 4 times. And it took a while, and it was tedious, but we didn't have any downtime, and we ended up migrating over. Okay, so the problem in the last slide was that even though we'd done all that, our product managers and our analysts were still writing queries to production, and it still has the same potential problem. So coupled with this process, we created a data warehouse. It will sound like stupid or overly simplified, but basically what we did was recreated that original single database by using a process to real-time stream each of these 4 databases back into one database. So we had taken one database, we had broken it apart into 4 databases, then we turned around and we streamed it all back into a single database. It made it easier on product, on analysts. They had familiarity with structure, the way things work, and they were able to continue to do their work, and they could write shitty queries, and it wouldn't take down production. So that was the next step in the process. And of course, at some point, they realized that it was really hard to write some queries because the way we had structured stuff was for production, and the way it was going to be working well, and not for how we wanted to analyze the data. So then you have to do some ETL. You have to do some batch jobs that take data from this data warehouse and transform it, and then push it into Redshift is what we're using since we're in AWS, and that solved more problems. But this is now delayed by the frequency we do the batch, and that was daily. And so we went for a long time with people being okay with that limitation, that I can't see this transformed data for today, I can only see it for yesterday. But we're a growing company, we wanna get better, so we evolve. And this is the pipeline that we have in place now, or the infrastructure. And it's not really thorough, but I'm leaving some stuff out. But I think the interesting parts are, we still have our Aurora clusters. We have a Kafka event stream that is taking real-time events coming through. We have a data lake based on S3. A data lake is kind of this, you put your data in lots of different places, maybe cheaper places, wherever it's comfortable, and then you have processes and tools that will be able to gather that data when you need it. And so by using Spark, SQL streaming, we're using a product called Databricks. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. They are like really good with Spark, and they've created this sort of they call it Delta. It's kind of like a data lake that allows you to access the real-time data, the data from S3, all transformed in real time. So it's pretty cool. It's not like fully done, but everyone's chomping at the bit to get at it because of all the potential to get access to all this data transformed in any way we need in real time. So we're hopefully by the end of this quarter. All right. Taking too long. All right, I'll go faster. Microservices. So back when, let me just say real fast, for people who don't know, if you've heard service-oriented architecture, it's the same thing. It's just, this probably means you end up with a lot more of them. Really what I mean is we're going from a monolithic architecture to a service-oriented architecture. Look, when I joined, and it's fair to say that this still sort of represents kind of what we do. We have web services. We have a web server that serves our app. It has a REST API and serves out all the stuff that we need to make our mobile apps work. We have something that serves up a website for customer service agents. We have, even though they're not full-time people, we have a ton of them. People have a lot of customers. We have another web server that's serving webhooks, inbound data coming into our system or requests. And then we have a lot of that stuff that happens in the background. We have queue processors. We use SQS in AWS, a simple queuing service, and that's what this is. And these things that basically pull stuff off a queue, process it, and either you're done or you put it on, you then trigger another queue with a message and then get processed. So our deployable artifacts really boil down to a number of web servers and a number of these background processing things. So if you remember back to the discussion earlier, this was, we sort of knew this was going to be helpful towards microservices, or SOA, I'm just going to keep calling microservices. By cleaning up our boundaries, it was a really important step to be able to take these things which we had, you can go to the next slide. It's supposed to be done now. We had, so anyway, you take these, those artifacts, those DLLs, and they were all linked into all these deployable things. So, we deploy this, but it's some code that's linking against domain A and domain B libraries, and you end up with all this problem that you have in these monolithic things where somebody wants to make a change to domain A, and they need to, and before they can ship it out, they are going to end up dealing with all the changes that happened in B and C, and testing's a problem. And so, that's the thing we're trying to avoid. Go to the next slide. This is what we're after. We want to deploy, you can see, as microservices or services with nice encapsulation of the data, just limiting, and then we're going to have, and we have sort of orchestration layer services. But this is the thing that we're moving towards. There's a lot of choice, like way more. When we started on this, I had no idea how many choices we were going to have to make along the way. There's when it's linked together, you're making a call, and you're calling through the stack, you're calling something in a library. If you were to break it in a debugger, you'd see a nice call stack. When you're doing this, you're like jumping across the network boundaries. You're making a call into some other service. So there's lots of stuff that we had to consider. Service mesh is kind of the thing that helps facilitate calls across the network. It will handle retries and timeouts and various things like that. Logging, observability. Like I said, you can't, when you're trying to debug something and it goes across multiple network hops, it becomes more challenging. You have to use tools, monitoring, alerting. There was lots of decisions to make. We ended up deciding to go towards containers. Quick show, people familiar with containers or no? Yeah, some chunk. Cool. I have another slide that maybe we don't have enough time to go through about containers and Kubernetes. Anyway, we ended up selecting to go with containers when you're using containers. Let me just hit the next slide and I'll go real quick. Containers are basically like if you have a normal VM, you have hypervisor, and then you basically have stuff that, like, this looks like an EC2 instance right here, this block, this stack of 3 blocks, and that other one looks like another instance. And we generally would launch things like that, and then we would decide to scale those instances. So it's like you're adding another computer. With containerization, you can launch as many containers as you need on a particular instance. There's tons of benefits. We decided to go that route. Once you go that route, then there are other choices to make. How are you going to orchestrate that? If you're in AWS, you can use ECS, Elastic Container Service. We ended up choosing to go with Kubernetes. The next slide is a little bit about that. I'm not going to, I think I've talked too much, but real quick, there's, you end up with nodes. Nodes are like instances. These are the pods. So our domains could scale in ways that very efficiently take advantage of resources and scale appropriate to the needs of those particular services. And yeah, maybe let's just go into security real fast. So we hired a CISO recently, and I wanted to make sure that whatever I said he was comfortable with, and so I'm not going to say very much. Really, the important takeaway here is it's easy when you're a small startup to not think very much about security. Everyone can have access to everything. I think I said some of this in the beginning. Everyone can get into prod. When you have an issue, when there's an outage or a problem with your service, it's really nice to have anyone who needs have access to whatever they need. That's really very, very nice. I miss that. We don't have that anymore. So if you go to the next slide, we do what you have to do when you grow up a bit. We have walls. It's really hard to get to production, but this is the kind of thing you need to do to ensure that mistakes aren't made. And as you get more mature and you have lots and lots of people using a product, and you have people's debit card numbers, and you have their bank transaction data, and you have things that are like really important, you have to have this. You have to mature. And so, we've gone through lots of different compliance efforts, and in the process, we've added in lots of processes. And I think our goal is to try and get as close as we could to the, if you need it, there's a process to give it to you, and hopefully the SLA is really fast. But it's not that you can just go and hop in at any point and go and look at somebody's data or hop in and mess around with a computer and instance in production. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. We can, if anyone has questions later, I can dig into more. We'll see. Anyway, I think these next 2 slides are just to talk about the fact that we're way more hiring a CISO is really important when you get to this stage, because he knows all sorts of stuff about like how this process should work that I had no clue about, and I frankly am glad that he thinks about it, and I don't need to think about it as much, except for when I need to go back and be like, we have to make this process easier. But anyway, there's the various stages. I think we're somewhere in between the first 2 right now in terms of our evolution on security. And we are having a much more involved security infrastructure. I'm not going to go through all this, but governance, risk, compliance, stuff I never would have thought of 4 years ago that we need to be thinking about having that event. We really need it now. Infrastructure products, security operations. These are all I've come to understand and believe these are all very important for us as we continue to grow. So, quick summary. Let's see. The trade-offs can be contentious as you make them, and I'm always wondering, did we make the right decisions? And the thing that makes me feel like some of the stuff that I felt gross about along the way that we finally went back and cleaned up. Some of it we haven't. Some of it we have queued up to clean up. It's the fact that we are a hyper-growth company, and we have the opportunity. I think we're really fortunate. A lot of startups with great ideas don't end up being as fortunate as we are in the place that we are right now. So I think that it's always been interesting. I always find every trade-off, speed versus quality, specialization versus flexibility, business value versus technical debt. These are certainly something we address on a quarterly basis at our planning sessions, and frequently things that we have to make decisions on, on a daily basis. But I think that as a company, we have a great mission. We have great people, and I think that we've executed well enough to sort of earn the right to keep growing and constantly evolve. I think that's sort of all I have.
Thank you very much, Ramanique. We do have some time for a bit of an AMA, so you can ask Ramanique anything. If you're interested in asking a question, if you could just raise your hand so we could bring the mic over to you.
Left at St. Regis Lane.
Okay, so right here, first question.
I wanted to ask about that, how earning application works. How do you calculate the staff earnings at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Is there any challenge?
Yeah. No, it is challenging. We decided early on to not be a B2B company, to work directly with our customers. There's a number of reasons, and that's probably a whole different question. But because of that, and because of the fact that we're not actually working directly with employers, we have to find these various ways. So we have different ways. So one of the first things we do, we ask the customer to trust us with a lot of data. We ask for bank credentials. We use bank data aggregators. We get access to bank transaction data and balance information. We use that to understand payroll, understand how often they get paid, what their pay cycle is, lots of other stuff. We use that data to more quickly confirm that money transactions have happened. There's a number of things we use that data for. We also, that helps us on the sort of payroll side and account verification. If we move money, we want to be able to see it in their bank transactions. And then in order to build this earnings account, we need to know when someone's working. And so we use location data. We have other sources. If you're an Uber driver, we have an API integration with Uber, but for a good chunk of people, they tend to opt into location services, and we geofence where they work. There's some algorithms and some data science that we apply, but by being able to know when someone goes to work and when somebody leaves, and we know effectively how much they earn per time, we can build this real-time earnings account, and then we can access it. Is that cool?
Next question.
Is the app only available in the US, or is it available in Canada and other countries?
It's just US right now.
When it comes?
I don't know. It's easiest probably to go into Canada next. I know just by, I know that it's probably easiest for us, but in prioritization, there's, it's a challenging question to prioritize expanding what you're doing now versus making sure you do what you do where you're doing it the best you can, and you address as much of the market as you can and offer the right complementary services that sort of are aligned with our mission before you step into a different geography.
There's also legislation
There's lots of considerations. Yeah, right. There's regulation. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for the call. So about authentication for the users, like did you use a service like Plaid, or did you do that yourself, like integrations with banks?
For the bank data integration, we use, we don't store anyone's bank credentials. We use the third parties. We use companies like Plaid.
Hi, there was a lot of information, so I'm sorry if I missed something. I do have 3 questions for you. So the first one is, in the idea phase, like the idea of like, similar to like, wallet, like electronic wallet, like WeChat payment, that kind of stuff, that came to you. You did mention about like in Silicon Valley, people just use what they have, like with debit cards, was something like that. So I'm just wondering, like, how did you decide, like, make the final decision
For
how you did the payment stuff, like?
Yeah, we started out with just with ACH. Kind of the same technology checks are based on. It's slow, but it was it's easier to get started with that. Eventually, we integrated with debit card rails, which allowed us to move the money instantly. Eventually, we took advantage of same-day ACH. Now there's even additional ways that we could move money faster. But it was all based on, easiest thing to get started first, and then we got better features that made it better for our customers down the road.
And the second question is about the tip model. You just said you weren't there in the beginning. I was just wondering, like, how long, since like it didn't really show a timeline on this slide for the growth, I'm just wondering how long did it take for you guys to feel like fully confident about that model?
Yeah, no, I think it showed that it was going to be solid from very early on. I joined Better 4.5 years ago. I think Ram had been doing this and proving it out for over a year. There was strong evidence when I joined that it was working, and then over the next several years of data, it proved itself to be reliable. I mean, we obviously focus on we don't want people to tip some large amount. We want them to tip what's fair, and it turns out that as long as we are really smart in our risk decisioning and our in all the extra costs and structure that we make it work.
Okay, I actually forgot the third question.
So on the early stage, on your early stage, you had about 6 backend developers, software engineers. You never talked about the security at all. And then I think at the third stage, you had a security. Like you deal with the money from the beginning. Who was responsible? Like how would you measure the risk, and like who was responsible? Like did you have someone that specifically did backend and also in charge of security?
Yeah, it's a good question. So ultimately, I was responsible for security ever since I started. We had, I came from PayPal. I brought some senior architects from PayPal. There was a fair amount of experience in security from that background, and then we leveraged outside. We leveraged third parties. We brought in consultants. We had one of our attorneys. So I'm gonna say this just because it sounds really fancy. He was the assistant director, I think, of cybersecurity policy for Department of Homeland Defense under Obama, and he was somebody that we had basically at our very expensive, but able to get access to whenever we needed. So we used third parties. Different companies came in, did security assessments. So when we didn't have a person owning, aside from me, we didn't have somebody that was qualified to really own it. We used other people.
Okay, we got another question right here.
Yeah, my question is, did you have any ethical dilemmas before joining a company which is essentially in some ways a replacement for payday loans?
I spent a fair amount of time trying to understand what the product was, and I think when I did, I didn't have any. I feel completely confident. Our product is helpful, and payday loans suck, and they hurt people. We're giving people with the opportunity to pay nothing, access to something they don't have, that they didn't have before. You know, the trade-off between maybe you tip nothing, maybe you tip a couple dollars, and you avoid a $40 bank transaction or overdraft fee. That's a good thing. And we look at our data. You know, our customers' financial health is better when they use our product. They work more hours. They have higher savings. I think the data shows that we're actually a very good thing for people. And there's a lot of data that shows that when you give people access to their earnings more frequently, that they actually spend their money more wisely. It's generally when you get your money in like big chunks that some people are more likely to like overindulge a bit. And when you can get access to your money more like in a streaming manner, people are much more responsible. Not that our customers aren't responsible, but in general, the data is showing that our product is actually really helpful.
Now that you've seen you've made your decision about trade-off features versus technical debt, would you do it differently?
Well, the benefit of hindsight, I would certainly not do any of the features that turned out not to be valuable for us. I would take all that time and I would turn around and I'd devote it to technical debt. It's a really hard question, and I maybe you could see it in my expression. It's painful sometimes because I want to be associated with a product that I'm like, I want to show anyone our system and our code and be like, ta-da! And sometimes I don't feel like I can do that, and I make myself feel better by looking at, you know, the fact that we can address more and more people at an incredibly high rate, you know, every day. And so it's a hard question, and I'm sure there's some things I would do a little different. You know, I'd probably look at the things that drove most of our larger incidents, and I would make sure I'd fix that shit earlier. But you know, you never know when you're going through it the first time.
Another question here in the back.
Hi. So, what's your tech stack, if you don't mind, like answering that question?
Sure. It is largely C# on .NET and Python. Python mainly is data science related stuff. The infrastructure, or the majority of it is .NET. We are, as we go to the containers and Kubernetes, we're moving to .NET Core as opposed to .NET Framework, so getting away from Windows and over towards open source. And now that we are, it's one of those, in Silicon Valley, it's a little less sexy than Go or Scala or something, but it's a rock solid language. It's and made no sense to just stop and rewrite something that's working. So we never chose to do that, and now that we are getting closer to realizing the microservices world, it's going to make it a lot easier. All the new stuff we're building, they're all microservices already, and when developers have had the choice, they haven't, because we try to democratize a fair amount in the development world, and there hasn't been any sort of strong drive to bring in something else. But I think it's also my job to start to make more options available for development folks. And so in time, maybe we'll start doing stuff that will bring in other languages. But yeah, anyway, so that's where we're at.
Thank you. So the other question would be like, any company, any financial company would deal with risk and like fraud and stuff like that. How do you manage that, and how do you keep that at a level that is acceptable within the company, and what is that level?
Well, I don't know that I'm going to say the level. Like I said, we hold some of that data pretty tight, but we have a function at the highest level of the company for risk. A lot of data scientists are focused on that. We are able to leverage some of the bank transaction data we have to make better decisions. We don't turn anyone away, but we do moderate the amount that we might give people access to on a per pay cycle basis based on the risk assessment. So that's one of the many tools that we have.
Probably have time for just one or two more questions if there are any. Right here.
I actually wanted to ask, since you're actually giving out payments to individuals, what specific challenges that you actually went through regulation-wise or compliance-wise when you're actually giving funds out to individuals, whether if it's $100 or $10,000 or let's say even $100,000?
Yeah, it's a good, interesting question. We don't qualify under U.S. laws, regulations as a credit product or a loan product. We don't need to be regulated as a money transmitter. There's some term for what we are, the spot we're sitting in, but I think, we used to be, so under the last U.S. administration, there's an agency called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I think they had taken a long look at us. They recognized the consumer benefit we provided, and they were working with us to make sure that as they were crafting new regulation to folks in the payday industry, that we were not unintentionally swept into that lump. But administration's changed. States have now tried to have to, with the U.S. federal level sort of stepping back, CFPB sort of been kind of dismantled. The states are taking a look, and so some of the states now we need to continue to have that relationship with various states. There's more and more states that we're talking with and contributing to the discussion about how we should be regulated. So there are ongoing efforts by various states, and we're working with them to figure out the right way to create regulation around it, so that even though I think data shows that we're on the good side of things, without regulation, other people can do products similar to ours, and they can have spins on it that aren't very good. And so I think we would love to be regulated in a way that allows us to continue to do what we're doing, and so we're working with U.S. states to make it happen.
Austin, if you can join me for another round of applause for Ramanique. So just a couple more things before we wrap up. First of all, to everybody on the live stream, thank you for joining us from wherever you are in the world. We try and do these Terminal Tech Talks every single month, and it's our vision and mission with the Tech Talk series to bring world-class speakers to share their hard-earned learnings on subject matters that our technical communities care about. So next month, we're actually going down to Mexico in our Guadalajara office, where we're having a tech talk on December 3rd. So if you're interested in tuning in from Vancouver, you're more than welcome to. The live stream link I could send out, it's just terminal.io/livestream. But on top of that, I also wanted to mention, just by show of hands, how many of you identify as like developers in the audience? Awesome, awesome. So, Earnin's one of our fastest growing partners. They're definitely hiring here in Vancouver if anybody's interested, or if you have friends that are interested. Please reach out, talk to us. There's some people in the room as well. There's also other companies as well in this space that are hiring here in Vancouver. So if you're interested in learning more about those opportunities, we're happy to talk to you about that. And lastly, of course, we got Ramanique a special gift. So thank you so much for taking the time. He came all the way from Palo Alto this morning, so one more time. So that wraps up. We definitely still have some sandwiches left and some drinks if you're interested. We're going to hang out for a bit. There's a bunch of people from the Earnin team here. I believe there's about,
raise your hands.
Raise your hands if you're here from Earnin. Awesome. So the Earnin team's here as well if you want to talk to them. But yeah, thanks so much for coming out, and we'll let you know about the next one here in Vancouver as well. Thank you.